Namaste and good evening, everyone. Welcome to the NENCID Talk program. My name is Jigyasha Rai Yangkhurung, an Executive Committee member of Nepal National Committee on Irrigation and Drainage, NENCID. NENCID is a national committee for ICID, International Commission on Irrigation and Drainage, which was established in 1950 AD. And Nepal has been a member of ICID since 1973, which is almost 50 years now. ICD is a leading scientific, technical, and professional, not-for-profit international organization with a vision of a water-secure world free of poverty and hunger through sustainable rural development. It is a knowledge-sharing platform, so it brings together various stakeholders and multidisciplinary professionals such as planners and policymakers, water managers, irrigation and agriculture engineers, research scientists, educationists, etc., to deliberate on technical, agronomic, socioeconomic, environmental, and managerial complexities for the development, management, and operation of irrigation, drainage, and flood management works. Therefore, in order to share and exchange knowledge and experiences among these professionals, NENCID has been organizing this talk program as a part of Irrigation and Drainage Talk series. In this series, a program is held every second Tuesday of every month according to Bikram Samvat calendar. And today's event is the 19th episode of this series. The announcement for the 20th episode will be shared at the end of this event, so please stay with us till the end. Please follow our Facebook page, NENCID, Nepal National Committee on Irrigation and Drainage, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, NENCID Nepal. If you want to check any past episode of this talk series, they are all available in our channel. If you have any suggestions, comments, and feedbacks, please write to us at nencid.nepal@gmail.com. Now, before starting the main event, I'd like to state some of the ground rules. Today's session will be an hour long. First 25 minutes will be a presentation, which will be followed by question, answer, and discussion round. During the session, please kindly mute your microphone. And to ask questions or comments or to express your viewpoints, we encourage you to maximize the use of chat box. In order to share your opinions verbally, please unmute yourself before speaking. Now, with this brief background, I would like to invite Professor Dr. Vishnu Pandey from Institute of Engineering, Pulchowk Campus, who is also an executive committee member of NENCID, to introduce the speaker and moderator session. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Jigyasa-ji. Namaste, good evening in Kathmandu and maybe some different time zone elsewhere. Welcome to you all in this session. I'm very pleased to introduce our speaker, Dr. Santosh Nepal, to talk about water, energy, food ecosystem nexus challenges for operationalizing nexus in Nepal. This is really a complex, interesting topics, and which is, I think, for the next many years, we'll be working around these topics. Thank you, Dr. Nepal, for agreeing to be to share your knowledge with us. Next slide, please. He's my good friend, and he used to work with International Center for Integrated River Mountain Development, or EC-MODE, for the last 10 years as a climate and hydrology group lead before he joined IWMI, or International Water Management Institute, as a water resource and climate change researcher since March 2022. At IWMI, he is responsible for leading and managing applied research on water resources, water, energy, food ecosystem nexus, and climate change in the Himalayan region, including Nepal, Southeast and South Asia. Over the last 17 years of his successful professional career focused primarily on research and development, Dr. Nepal has contributed to scientific advancement in Himalayan hydrology, climate change, and a better understanding of upstream downstream linkage of land and water management of various scales. These collaborations have applied in important scientific appeared in important scientific publications, including Science and Nature. Dr. Nepal has also contributed to IPCC special report on ocean and cryosphere in a changing world, and also he was a contributing author with the AR6 Asia chapter. Dr. Nepal holds a PhD in hydrology and climate change and he has two master's degree, one in environmental management and another in anthropology in natural resource management. With this very brief background, he has a very long CV, but very brief. In a few minutes, I would like to invite Dr. Nepal. You will have 25 minutes for your talk. We will help you to keep the time by reminding in between. Please, maybe, uh, okay. You may please share your slide and continue.
Okay, thank you, Vishnu sir. I'll first try to share my screen. Okay. Okay, which screen you are seeing?
Yeah, we can see it very nicely.
Okay. Thank you, Vishnu ji. Thank you, Jigyasha ji, and thank you, NENCID, for this opportunity to share some of my work related to the Nexus with this very important forum here. And I see a very important people joining this meeting as well. And so I have 25 minutes. So in between, somebody will, I can also use my, okay, yeah. So let's start. So today's talk, I'll be mainly focusing on the Nexus overall, water, energy, food ecosystem. But towards the end, I'll be also kind of sharing the challenges for operationalizing Nexus in the context of Nepal. If you look at the discourse of water, energy, food, it's not a new word. It has been there for a long time, but the relevancy of Nexus was actually realized in 2007-8, the global financial crisis, and which actually motivated to discuss the importance of water, energy, food Nexus. Yeah, if you look at this food prices of food, fuel, and fertilizer prices of since 2000, then you see that we have already seen 3 food fertilizer crises in last 15 years. One beginning in 2007 and 8, and then again in 2011 and 12. And then, of course, in the COVID time, the crisis was there. And it is not a single component crisis, it is actually a joint crisis, because this is what the Nexus is telling, that things are interconnected. And I'll share some of my slides to indicate that. So in 2011, the World Economic Forum identified the, through their report, Global Risk Report 2011, identify water, energy, food as a major source of uncertainty for the global economy. So that's where the global importance of the Nexus. So it also indicates that water security, food security, and energy Nexus, and climate change also in the context of global climate change is strongly linked to the global governance failures, economic disparity, and geopolitical conflict. In this discourse, the ecosystem and environment component was later added. So nowadays it is called WIFI, water, energy, food, ecosystem Nexus. But these are not like a stone carved, you'll see a lot of other subcomponents, groundwater and agriculture Nexus. So it depends upon the case studies as well. And recent time, this Nexus importance is very high also in the context of climate change, population increase, rising consumptions of consumption pattern, and the food security at the global scale. So I think most of you are aware about this interconnectedness between the water, food, and energy ecosystem Nexus. They are interlinked and non-linear as well. So here you see that the water is very crucial for food productions. Water is also very crucial for energy. But at the same time, energy is a vital component for the entire agri-food processing system, including the processing, distributions, and treatment. Food also, although the water is one of the primary user of the agriculture sector, more than 90% of the water usage is for agriculture. So for that reasons, the food processing industries and others also can contribute to the water quality, like, either pollutions or other aspects. Energy, and then the food to energy, but also to energy to food, the pumping, processing, transportations for groundwaters and other things. So these are like very interconnected systems. And in the entire things, ecosystem is very crucial, which is like cross-cutting. So any water use, any sectors using the water resources, the ecosystems is compromised in case of aquatic ecosystems or terrestrial ecosystems and others. So ecosystem is very vital component. So in this, so the Nexus approach actually allowed the analysis of the interlinkages between sectors, and then gain the positive synergies, and then effectively manage the trade-off. So let's look at the these three components in the case of Nepal. I think we all know that, yeah, Nepal has water availability 225 billion cubic meters, which in general is like not a small numbers, but we need to also look at the disparity between the too much and too little water. And then there is a big temporal gaps, 8 months we have too much water, 80% of the rainfall, but sorry, 4 months. And then the 8 months is like too little water, less than 250 or 300 millimeter. And there is a water management trade-off between the different sectors, blue versus green versus gray. And then also the geographically scales, upstream and downstream, the water flows from the upstream to downstreams and then connects the entire river systems. So in case of Nepal, the governance challenge is that recently we have these federal structures, and then Nepal is also pushing the integrated management approach. Let's look at the energy scenarios. The hydropower potential is in Nepal. Here you see the theoretical potential of 83,000 megawatt and different variations, but when it comes to the technical potential and economic potential, you'll come up like in the range of 45 to 42,000 megawatt, which is less than 5% of the which is currently being harnessed. But what is missing in the equation is that we seldom talk about the sustainable potential, by considering the ecosystems, hazard, risk, riparian requirements, and other things. We have seen recently the disasters affecting the mountain disasters affecting the hydropower in Chamoli, in Uttarakhand, and a lot of histories have indicated that the hydropowers are actually moving upwards. And for that reason, the more you go up, there are a lot of challenges, especially related to the mountain hazard and other risk. So in the context of water energy food ecosystem nexus, energy requirement for pumping groundwaters is unknown. Transportation of foods, storing foods, at the very local scales, role of micro hydropower in food security, and then what is the energy production projections in the context of increasing GDP and population in the future. So these are still big unknowns. Here you see the big, let me bring the ledger. So the import and then the export. The export is more or less constant, as you can see here, but the import, agri commodities import, and here I picked few variables like cereals, coffee, tea, and vegetables. It's constantly increased over the period of time. What is very important here is that our imports is 4 to 5 times higher than the export in agriculture commodity sectors. But if you look at the fuel and other imports, which is actually coming a big number. So here the irrigation is a primary user. In Nepal, 50% of the arable land is irrigated. In Tarai, it is just 60%, but in Tarai, still 630,000 hectares of land is unirrigated in Tarai. And if you compare our crop productivity with the South Asia, with other countries like Bangladesh, even India, it's quite low. So big unknown here is that the groundwater potential versus the sustainable use for agriculture, a role of energy, particularly for agri-processing and value chain, and then the importance of agri-processing in terms of storage, drying foods, and then its energy requirements. So here I've already touched upon, but there is a multiple interface among water, food security, and nutrition security. Water is very, very essential for the food and nutrition security. And on the left here, you see the natural water cycles, which actually provide us the availability, access, quality, quantity, stability. And this water resources has been used for different sectors, from wash to food preparations to food processing, and also the energy production. And these are actually an industry also. And these sectors are actually the backbone of economic development. And this economic development, and then along with the other sector, is actually providing the food security and nutrition security. And in the entire process, water is a system connector for ecosystem, food, energy, and economic activities. And then equally important is the water could be potential for conflict in transboundary river basins. And South Asia is, again, one of the example of these transboundary river basins, but also conflict. So water security is actually linked to the energy security and food security. If you look at from the Nexus perspective, the Nexus approach moves beyond the traditional sectoral thinking in order to achieve the overall security. And then the Nexus interlinkages with the Sustainable Development Goals also is very important, because these are very important sectors, which is overall linked to the Sustainable Development Goal. Here I picked some of the examples of the different Sustainable Development Goal indicators and how they are linked to the Nexus example. I think in context of Nepal, if we only talk about Nexus, then I feel that this will be a little bit incomplete, because we have also the integrated holistic management approach like IWRM, and Nexus is also a Nexus is also a holistic management approach. So what is Nexus versus IWRM? So these are the discussions that we are having in some forums also, I recall. But literature indicates that, yeah, the IWRM is more water-centric, as its names also suggest, like water resource management, and it lacks the necessary cross-sectoral support in a holistic manner. For example, the agriculture. There is a slow pace of adoption of IWRM, although IWRM has been implemented in a number of countries, including Nepal. But we have seen that the adoption rate is slow. And then there are different implementing modalities. In case of Nepal, we have been hearing about the discussions, river basin organization, river basin offices kind of discussions. In contrary, Nexus is originated from the equal footing concept, with each sector being given to the equal importance. It addressed the institutional silos. There is a strong demand for operationalizations, but Nexus still now is more in academic research limited. So there is a slowly gaining momentum for the implementations, but it also provides the rationale for why we need a synergy and trade-off. But the big questions, I think, I don't have answers, but probably we can discuss this during the question answer session, is that can Nexus be implemented within the larger framework of the integrated water management? But equally, there is a criticisms of the Wi-Fi Nexus approach also. The criticisms actually at mostly at the three levels. Conceptual level, we still kind of, there are literature which suggests that Wi-Fi also seems like a water-centric approach. So how do we really bring it to the equal footing concept in a true meaning? But since it is an emerging concept, there is a lack of common definitions, methods, and framework. At analytical level, also again, like a starting point probably is mostly focused on water. existing tool failed to address the complex interlinkages and trade-off among the different sectors. And impact level, impact to decision making is limited. So I personally also feel that the Nexus still need to reach out to the decision makers, decision-making process more. There's a lack of clarity on the environmental and social well-beings, how it is addressing the livelihood and other social components. And then when Nexus is discussed, it is mostly, these focused on macro and global levels. Now also with the Russia and Ukraine conflict, you see the price of the fuel has increased. And that is again reflected to the number of other sectors, agricultural products, transportations, and others. So actually the Nexus relevance actually originates from the global level. But how do we bring that global context to the local context is a big problem. Here I have one slide. I think probably you have seen this slide already. To Nexus example in case of Nepal, groundwater, energy, food, and agriculture food nexus. So in Nepal, we have 8.8 billion cubic meter of annual groundwater recharge, out of which we have only used 22%. In the plain Tarai region, in southern Nepal, we still have 600,000 hectares of potential irrigation land in Tarai. If we and this land is currently being, this is a little bit old figure, 2019 from irrigation master plan, maybe slightly it had changed. If we and this 600,000 hectare is currently being for the rice paddy only. So additional water requirement for other winter crops and spring rice is 1.4 billion cubic meters, so additional 16%, 16 or maybe 19, maybe a typo, yeah. So something like total like slightly more than 40%. Yeah, our energy scenarios is also improving. So how can we utilize that energy to sustainably pump the groundwater is another big question. And not only hydropower energy, we can also think of the solar. And in that case, I think this additional 600,000 land can be utilized for additional summer rice, 23 million tons, monsoon rice, 0.3 million ton, and winter wheat, 1.7 million ton. So the gross revenue can reach up to $2.2 billion and net benefit of 1.1 billion. So we have this figure at the national level. This may not be applied to the local context everywhere, but this is something the data is telling us, so we should explore that more to the local context. Let's bring the climate change into the Nexus domain. Emerging studies on the Nexus approach suggest that understanding the links in WIFI Nexus in the context of climate change is very, very important to avoid future conflict and also the political and social stability. So the another important thing is that in the context of climate change, I'm calling it climate crisis, there is a cross-sectoral impacts. And I think this is highlighted in Deepak sir's book that and the Nexus as well, like it might be big challenge to address a sectoral problems if we only try to resolve that problems within the sectoral, by only looking at the sectors, because the impacts are actually cross-sectorals. Take an example of agriculture. If your agriculture is suffering because of the water availability situations, then you cannot resolve the agriculture problem by only investing in agriculture sector. You have to actually go across beyond agriculture and look at where the water is coming from, what is the stress levels, how the drought is affecting, how the glacier melting is affecting. So that cross-sectoral impact is also relevancy is very high in the context of climate change and Nexus. In Nepal also, if you look at the relevancy of Nexus from the socio-economic context, you see that the population projections is increasing. So by 2031, the urban population would be, the total population 31.6 million projections, but urban population is 13% in 2000, and it would be increased to 20% in in 2020. So, so how do we manage these resources in the context of population increase? So that means that more food, more resources required, but also look at the climate change context, warmer and wetter climate with higher variability. Climatic extremes are likely to increase. Food security is critical. And I have one examples how this climate crisis can affect the food security in the next slide. So this is for Nepal also the relevancy in the context of socio-economic change and climate change is very important. But not only Nepal, if you look at the South Asian context, so this is the example from Indus. So India's population 206 million in 2016 will increase by 50% by 2050s. Patient GDP is projected to increase by 8-fold. In mid-century, temperature and precipitation will increase by nearly 2 degrees Celsius. So there is a strong growth in population and economic development. Which
sorry to disturb you. You have 5 more minutes, Santoshji.
Okay.
Thank you.
And there is a strong demand for fresh water and other wave resources. So there is a considerable increase in domestic water use, as you can see here, 2015 versus 2080. This is a domestic water use. This is energy requirement increasing by 2050s and food requirement increase by 2050. So, so I'll skip these slides, but quickly indicating that this is actually telling you that in case of Indus, what is the meltwater contribution and groundwater contribution for rice, wheat, and cotton. And then the upper banner is the reference contribution. So here, for example, in cotton, the relevancy of meltwater is very high in May, June, July. And this relevancy will further stress the importance of meltwater in the different climate change scenarios. So there will be more dependency on groundwater. But at the same time, there will be more dependency on more dependency on the meltwater and more dependency on the groundwater. So for example, in case of wheat, so quickly skipping these slides. But what is more important in case of irrigation here, you see in Indus, melt runoff, total runoff, and then the irrigation demand for different reference period, the black one, and then the blue one are the RCP 4.5 SSP1 scenarios, and red one is RCP 8.5. So there will be overall increase in irrigation water demand due to expansion of irrigation areas and higher crop water demand in a warmer climate. A projected increase in runoff during the high flow season, as you can see here. And this also shows because here you see that in case of melt runoff, there is an early melt runoff coming. So that means that we might need to think about different adaptation practices to best utilize this early melting period, and then probably also for the groundwater. Earlier, I mentioned about these climatic extreme events, and here the data of the last year, extreme rainfall in Western Nepal, and DHM data indicate that in the 2 days, 18 and 19 October, the cumulative rainfall in DWRI was 502 millimeters. And this actually impacted the Western Nepal, including Bardia and other places. So the impact of that 2 days extreme rainfall was, it damaged the crop paddy, basically 110,000 of hectare. And then the total loss was 12 billion Nepalese rupees, 12 arab, and then the government provided a compensation of nearly 5 arab rupees. So this also brings the relevancy that why we need to deal with the climate extreme events and what can we do to improve the situations like this situation. So maybe crop advisory or something. So my last few slides on the operational challenges of Nexus in Nepal. I categorize this into 3 broad categories, but there are other number of issues also. The one is the governance and policy environment. So lack of clarity in policy at the moment. Governance structures also in the context of local versus federal. Institutional mechanism and governance tools and approaches are also lacking in case of Nepal, and it applies to the mostly other countries also. The big questions in Nepal is that how does Nexus fit into other existing resource management framework like IWRM? And then sometimes there is a dilemma. Okay, there is IWRM framework, there is a Nexus framework, there is a nature-based solution, there is integrated flood management, integrated drought management. So we need we need to think about some kind of overarching framework of resource management. Wi-Fi still lacks the scientific understanding and Wi-Fi interlinkages and trade-off, co-benefits and synergies. Similarly, the tools, approaches, data are also not sufficient to do this complex analysis. There is a lack of community of practice, understanding the strengths of other sectors, sharing of data, information, knowledge, and good practices, and common platform for sharing learnings and lessons learned, I think, which is very, very important. But the operational challenges are not only limited to these operational challenges, also because it's a multi-centric approach, which is always complex, and there is no one-size-fits model. We need to customize the context and bring the context specific. In case of Wi-Fi, we really need a proof of concept across the skills, the good practices that people want to see how the Wi-Fi is operationalized at the field level. Or like I already mentioned, it is mostly dominated by academic circle. But equally important in the case of mountainous region is that the nexus across skills, because when you look at the upstream, downstreams, river connects from upstream to downstreams, but there are issues at different levels, whether it's groundwater use or irrigations in mountainous context, So how do we bring this Wi-Fi nexus in the context of the different scale is very, very important. And in case of Nepal, its federal structure also brings that importance. Actually, International Water Management Institute, IMI, is also trying to address this through the Nexus Scans initiatives. And we have very dedicated Ganges basins and component. And then we are working in Nepal in terms of developing these interactive tools, which I mentioned earlier, the environmental flow assessment tools. How can we boost the agriculture and water productivity at multiple scales? Linking the food security, livelihood improvements, and also the energy security, and then creating multi-stakeholders Wi-Fi governance, and then the developing a capacity of Wi-Fi actors or bringing the Wi-Fi champions. And that's what we are expecting to do in the first phase of the project, in terms of providing the in-depth understanding of water availability of Wi-Fi resources. Multi-stakeholders will utilize the tools and approaches to improve water productivity, gender-sensitive business model for energy access, a governance toolbox, champions and leaders for Wi-Fi, and a lot of innovations. So my last slide on the takeaway is, as I mentioned on my title slide, is the Wi-Fi in Nepal also getting popular. A number of different agencies are working on the Nexus. So what we need to unpuzzle in the coming few years is the tools and instruments in terms of quantifying the the resources and how they interact with others. More quantitative research, but as well as the qualitative research, bringing the decision support systems for Wi-Fi decision-making process. Understanding the resources, these interlinkages, synergy and trade-off, climate and non-climatic data. So for these two things, I think the data and information is very crucial, which can actually help to develop the decision support system. From the policy sides, we need more policy support, financial and political support, different level of role of governments, capacity buildings, and synergy with other approaches. And then, of course, at the end, the Nexus governance, what would be the optimum institutional and governance framework, whether it's a river basin organizations or offices or any other kind of things. And then the how do we governance in the context of uncertainty? How do you bring these adaptations, the flexible adaptations under the uncertainty? And then we really need good practices of solving local problems so that Wi-Fi as Nexus is important across the sector. So with this, I would like to end the presentation. Sorry that I've probably taken a few extra minutes. Thank you. Over to Vishnu Ji.
Thank you, Dr. Nepal, for very, very interesting and very simplified presentation for this complex issue. We highly appreciate it. There are already a couple of questions as a kind of opening questions in the chat box. Let us take from there. And for other participants, please feel free to put your questions, if any, not only questions, your viewpoints, because this is emerging topics. Many people might have different kind of viewpoints. Or so you can put in chat box, or you can just raise your hand and we will allow you to speak out. Let's take the two questions first, which is already in chat box. First one is, do you have practical example of Nexus in case of Nepal? And also, do you mean Nexus address water demand in a better way? What are your thoughts, Dr. Nepal?
Okay, Nexus examples. There are a couple of examples. I mean, as I mentioned in some of my earlier slides, is at the local scale, you see there are a lot of resource management practices, and then there is the interlinkages and trade-off among the different sectors also. I would like to give you an example of the hydropower practices in Adikola, where the water is diverted just before water going to the turbine. The part of the water actually goes to the irrigation in the other side of the river. So from the very beginnings, the water requirement was for the different sector was there. So the water is equally divided between the hydropower and irrigation. And this is one example, but there are other couple of, the resource management practices, whether it's community forestries, but we need to look at like how they have dealt the other, the different sectors requirement. But the complexities is also that, so I have been hearing in one occasions like, the community forestry are selling water to the private tankers, and this is not Lubu area in Patle Ban community forest, and this kind of ingredients are all already there, but we need to invest more time and resources to understand how does that fit within the context of Nexus. What are the last one? The second one?
Do you mean Nexus address water demand in better way?
It is indeed. The whole idea of Nexus in terms of managing the supply and demand, not only the water sectors, but other sectors also, what is the demand for agriculture or hydropower, when there is a stressful situation in a river basins where there are multiple hydropowers are competing huge, I think the relevancy of Nexus is way higher there, so that it can create a synergy and do a better trade-off. Yeah.
All right, thank you. There's one other interesting questions. There are a lot of storage projects are in pipeline in Nepal. Also, there are inter-basin transfer projects. But one project may have impacted others. For example, Kosi storage has impact on Kosi Tapu Reserve, and also it is making impact on Sunkosi Kamala diversion. If we take another example, Sunkosi marine diversion has already affected Sunkosi 2 storage projects. Even the marine diversion will bring huge flood in the marine river. So in this context, what we can see from these examples is when one sector is developing some projects, other sector is neither maybe either not consulted well or not taken care of. So it reflects a silos approach. So how can those kind of issues can be addressed better? Or maybe can you elaborate a bit about silos deafness? A new term he has used is from Rajesh Silpakar. So this is the question to you.
Yeah. I think the relevancy of approaches like Nexus is when there is a competing water use, when there is a limited resources and every sector wants water. And that's where the main role of the Nexus comes in terms of what is the optimum use of the resources, so that, we have been to the field for the Western Nepal and irrigations, all the farmer groups wants the water for their planting time at the same date, which is then again like really impossible for the irrigation managers to provide. And then they had to provide the water on a the rotation basis. So similarly, in a very stressful situations, and then the examples like the inter-basin water transfer, when there is a competing water use where the same resources has been the different sectors demands at the same time or the more or less, I think the relevancy But where does that decision comes from? That decision actually comes from that when we have a better analytical tools, where the analytical tools and the algorithms like, the optimization algorithms can give us the better ideas about when is the best time to use the resources and which group is getting the water and which group is getting the water first and second kind of things. Yeah. Not a definitive answer, but like, yeah, more generic.
All right. There's one more question from Dr. Kim, sir. That is about, due to federal governance system, inter-provincial water conflicts are emerging. So how those kind of conflicts can be minimized, whether Nexus approach can help in that context? And also do you think the Nexus means multi-purpose water undertaking? What are your thoughts? There are two questions in there.
Theoretically, yes. I mean, Nexus will deal those kind of, the federal context. But the larger question here is like, which is the equivalent questions to the IWRM also, is that there is no blueprint. You have to start implementing these approaches, and it's a process. Then you build one issues after another issues, and then starting from simple to the complex. So yeah, I mean, once we have the data and information and right tools, I think all those decisions in terms of the water use, managing the supply and demands for the different government tiers should be possible. And then what was the second part?
The second part is, do you think Nexus means multi-purpose water undertaking?
Maybe not, because then again, there is no difference between IWRM and Nexus. Still, the dominancy is that in Nexus also, probably the water sector people are more. I'm just telling it from my personal reflections, but the idea is not that the not only the multi-purpose water, but multi-sectoral approach, and then breaking that sectoral silos, that it not only water, it's energy is also equally important when it is relevant. Agriculture is also equally important.
All right, thank you. Dr. Hafid Ghani from Indonesia. Thank you, sir, for joining. I think, please go ahead, unmute yourself and go ahead. Dr. Ghani, you are still muted.
Well, thank you very much indeed.
Yes, please, go ahead.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, please.
Thank you very much
ahead,
indeed.
sir.
Well, thank you very much indeed. Well, I would like to thank you very much, and to say, well, my appreciation to Dr. Nepal for a very good presentation. Well, I agree very much about Wi-Fi. You call it Wi-Fi fee. It's a very complex problems, and you mentioned several aspects related to this one is with the lacking of necessary control support in a holistic manner. Also slow pace in adoption, integrated difficulties. But as far as our experience is concerned, learning about the Wi-Fi Nexus, there are at least 5 aspects that should be integrated. That is, first of all, is human resources development, and also integrated organization. And second one is organizational and institutional aspect, which should be included to each other. And the third one is technical problems, which is related to the Nexus per se. And the fourth one is financial, because when we speak about the implementation, we don't have to be relief of about financial. This is very important. And the last one is the legal aspect, because legal is also very important, because that one who arranged the probability for those who are against the activities or not. And then in that actually we have to integrate between this one. And my question is how far actually the integrated aspect between food and energy nexus in Nepal has been conducted in terms of integrated basis so far.
Thank you, sir, for your questions. Dr. Nepal, over to you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the questions. In Nepal, the Wi-Fi is relatively in infancy stage, but currently in last 5 years, number of development agencies, universities have shown interest on the topic, and they have already started working on a different scale. But our currently in Nepal, we are still in the research mode, where we are trying to understand these, the resources and how they are linked with each other at different scales. What is lacking in our case is that how do we bring this understanding to the policy levels so that we can highlight the nexus relevancy on a different resource management. And that's again because not only the sectoral silos are also in the policy. So policies are also quite a kind of sectoral reflection. So there also we need to bring these integrated components, and there are a couple of good examples, whether it's a water resource strategy or irrigation policy, where Nexus is already started getting attention. Yeah.
Thank you. Madhav Bilwasi, sir, please go ahead.
Yes. Here I am. Hello, namaskar everyone.
Namaste, namaste, sir.
Namaste, sir.
Santosh ji, it was a fantastic presentation on Nexus. Well, I don't know from where I should start. Firstly, well, I would just to add on what Dr. Ghani has already said. So many components needs to be identified or integrated. Institutional, human resources, financial aspect, legal aspect, so many aspects yet to be identified. Before that, I would like to ask, put on my concern. E.g., for example, we have already, almost at the end of preparation of vision plan. And before that, we also had, last year we have already, the water resource policy has been brought out. So where we have very clearly mentioned the integrated water resource management would be our policy center for the policy. So in this context, since the vision plan is in place, which is based on integrated water resource management, and before that, before implementation of even vision plan, so many projects, hydropower projects, have been licensed, thousands, 10,000s of megawatt of hydropower project already been licensed to the private. Many projects are under constructions. Many projects are, under feasibility study and different level of studies. So I don't know how, by the time you are saying that we have to understand energy, water energy nexus in a better way. We have to bring out the policy. We have to do a lot of things, carry out the research, policy, and then implementation. And you don't know the exact modality, how it is going to be implemented in our context. So by the time your policy is there, your implementation plan is there, the water and energy and climate crisis will be in peak. I don't know how you are going to solve these issues with this approach. My concern is that.
Thank you, sir. Over to you, Dr. Nepal.
Thank you, Bilwasi, sir. I think you raised a very important point, and I was hoping to have these discussions. Sometimes we see that the Wi-Fi nexus and IWRM or IRBM is more in a like a versus approach, whether it's IWRM versus the nexus. For me, it's not a competitive approach, and it's not like one approach is trying to replace others. At least in Nepal, that doesn't work. And I've written that in some of my op-ed last year as well, opinion patient, some newspaper, that probably we need to keep the IWRM as an overarching water management framework, which already in our case. But within IWRM also, we can find a space, or we can call it like subset of IWRMs, in which we can see the relationship of different components, whether it's integrated flood management or integrated drought management or nature-based solutions or water energy food ecosystem nexus. So we can actually bring that within the larger framework of integrated management practices. And this is also important because in case of Nepal's, with the discourse of IWRM, we have water resources strategy in 2002, National Water Plan 2005, and IWRM is being implemented. So my personal view here is also that we need to find a way in which we can accommodate these different concepts and frameworks within the larger overarching framework of the IWRM. So that's what I feel. This is very important.
That's the point. I mean, somehow we have to find out some sort of, compromise, I would say, compromise. Since something has already been done in IWRM, something already been done in silos, I mean, for different sectors. So this nexus, try to bring the nexus between all these sort of things,
Yeah.
So I think we have to really study on holistic manner again, in holistic manner, what is already been done and what it to be done. And basically all these approaches are there to solve the energy problem, to solve the food problem, to solve the water problem, to solve the climate problem, climate change problem. So I think the whole things need to be studied in a holistic manner, and where are the pitfalls, where we need something, where we have already done more, I mean, better way. That needs to be analyzed, and then some sort of compromise has to be settled out,
Yeah.
Yes.
Or I would even call it, Belgase sir, more complementarity that we need to find out.
Exactly.
And which may be something lacking in case of IWRM is that the agricultural sector, how do we bring more meaningful way? And we don't need to replace the IWRM things. IWRM can remain there, but in some sort of special setup, we can also look at the hydropower, agricultures, irrigations, water linkages together. So I think that complementarity we can definitely find here. And that should be the way I feel here.
Thank you.
I think this is how we come to the consensus.
Thank you. And there is one related question actually. If we talk from water-centric viewpoint, what we need today is water should be made available whenever and wherever is required, right? So in that context, by bringing the new concept like Nexus, aren't we diluting the need for water management? Or it may slow down the water development. What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah,
it's a question from one of the participants.
Yeah, that's the exact problem. If you ask these questions to the agricultural management, and they will feel detached from the entire process because we are talking about only water management. So I think the whole idea here is that there is no doubt, at least in my perception, is that water is a system connector. You don't talk about the natural resource management in desert, but when that desert have a river, and when the river will bring your ecosystems, when your river will bring the agricultures, people and livelihood, then you started talking about the natural resource management. So the whole notion of that, if we only go the water management and then neglect the other sectors which are also depends on water, that's where the people will start feeling the disaggregation. So the whole idea of Nexus is that the equal footing, that we are giving importance equally to the energy, agricultures, ecosystems, and others.
All right, thank you. And one more interesting question there, it's like in policy coherence and institutional harmonization is a key for achieving the nexus gains, right? So in that context, in the federal level, we already have water energy ministries coming together. In the provincial level too, number of ministries are bringing down. And if we look at the local level, that's a real example of the nexus. Everything is done by a small unit. So it looks like we are going towards the synergies in Nexus. So it's just a coincidence, or what are your thoughts? This is a question from Dr. Nilhari.
Yeah, I think that's an important question. At the federal level and local levels, because of the merging of these ministries, probably the same unit is, looking the water, energy, food components or different components. But also the question, can somebody mute? Okay, I already did. Yeah. So the question here is that is a good start. But what is very important is that we need to understand how it is happening nexus at the field level. That is probably in the federal context. We know that the ministries are there, but we need to, can we strengthen more research components? Can we strengthen more data components, more information components, so that we know exactly how the trade-off is happening? We know exactly how the synergy can be created.
Yeah, that's fine. The question here is, this kind of synergy looking trend is just a coincidence or it's a planned one? That's the question. What are your thoughts?
I don't know. If I reform that question and say that, well, were they given a good thought of merging these ministries from the nexus perspective? Maybe not. Maybe there was another political requirement and others, but that's a good sign. I mean, we don't need to look for always the reasons, but this is definitely
that's
a good
right.
sign. Yes.
Great. And there was one question maybe we perhaps missed to discuss in detail. This silos deafness. Silos deafness is the term generally used. So could you elaborate a bit about it? There's a question asked already.
Okay, maybe Vishnuji, can you a little bit elaborate the silos deafness, and then I'll come.
No, maybe then I will ask to Rajesh Shilpakar. Please, would you please speak out this term? This is the question from Rajesh Shilpakar. My job is to link the people, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Rajesh Shilpakar, sir, would you mind repeating your question or maybe putting some context for that particular term? You are muted, Rajesh, sir. Okay, it looks like you just got this term in the workshop. Okay. So now the ball is in your court, Dr. Nepal.
Okay. Let's look at these questions a little bit differently, and I'll put one blunt statement, and I'm also looking at Belvase, sir, if he's still here. Sectors are, am I wrong if I say that sectors are meant to be silos? Sectors are meant to be silos. Am I wrong if I'm saying that? The reason I'm telling you is that if you start theoretically bringing everything together, are you imagining like one ministry is looking after everything, or at least the resource management perspective? I think our development agencies or many other organizations, you see that there is some thought on these sectors because there is certain similarities, but what is important from Nexus perspective is that, for example, when the road construction is happening, then whether there is a policy, the Nexus actually needs to be reflected in policies. The sectors will work on silos, but the policy will bring them together. If you are developing, if the road department is developing a road in a, the ecosystem, biodiversity important areas, do we have policy mechanisms so that the road constructions will consult with the other sectors like forest sectors or the locally scale governments? Do we have that mechanism or not? If we have that mechanism, that is Nexus. And that Nexus in Nepal is a very good example, is the environmental impact assessment, at least in a theoretical way, how the reports are developed. The operational part has a lot of challenges, the environmental management plan person. But in EIA, when the hydropower sector is there, the consultation will happen with the road or forestry, and all these department needs to provide the approval. And that's, for me, that's actually the nexus is happening. If that is happening in a more more honest way, that actually takes into account the problems and then the trade-off or impacts on the different sectors.
Thank you, sir. I think we are almost at the end of the session because considering the time. And I see one comment here, maybe it's from Sabnam. It looks like Sabnam Sivakoti, madam from Department of Agriculture, I believe. The Gandaki province has merged the ministries and now agriculture, energy, and water resources under one ministry. That sounds interesting. And it will be good to look how the integration of the institutions will take place in the coming days. So it's very interesting news, and we can maybe look them very closely how it will unfold in the future. With this, I think...
if I can add, Vishnu Ji,
yes,
I'm really happy that all these questions are coming. But this is the Sabnam ma'am question. This is definitely a good sign that, even at the policy level, things are, the relevant ministries or relevant sectors are coming together. But we have also seen in Western Nepal that, there is an extremely lack of coordinations between the irrigation and agriculture department. There are complaints from both sides that the irrigations managers are saying that, yeah, the agriculture doesn't come to irrigation, or irrigation doesn't go to the agriculture. But when there is external interventions like ACU, the World Bank intervention in Rani Jamara, Kuleria irrigation schemes, agricultural component unit, they have a dedicated agricultural component unit, ACU, in irrigation systems within, and there is an extremely good benefits that the farmers are gaining because of that agricultural component. But you don't get the same things in the Baboi, and same thing on the Mahakali. So somewhere that institutions, probably the provincial government can address that, but still we have this systems of looking something from federal or something from provincial is also kind of dividing few things.
That's great. And this kind of discussion has been summarized very nicely by Dr. Kim, sir, that it means the practice of joint planning is the need of the hour. I really agree with that. Thank you so much, Dr. Nepal, for your very, very insightful presentation. And thank you to everyone for putting your opinions, questions, or feedback or thoughts, whatever it is, to make this session really engaging. It's really engaging session, and you all deserve a great thank. Thank you so much. And like always, now it's time to announce for the next session.
Vishnuji,
yes,
maybe
please.
I can take this opportunity for thanking the NENCID
Certainly, yes.
For sharing my views on this important topic. And I'm extremely happy seeing these questions. And maybe I'm requesting the organizer to copy paste these questions somewhere. Maybe we don't have access this later. And maybe I will be very happy to receive that. Thank you so much, and good night, everyone.
Thank you so much. Sorry.
I'm looking forward to see you.
Okay. I'm sorry, what happened? It's not. Okay. Now it's the time to announce for the next sessions. Like always, at the end of the session, we announce the next next talk series. Yes, please.
Yes. No,
yes,
it's
please.
all right.
Okay. The next talk would be on the topics would be from Dr. Rakit Alzabadel. He will be talking about, sorry, I can't see here. Okay, evaluating the potential of using Earth observation and remotely sensed information in agricultural water management. This will be held again in the second Tuesday of the Nepali month, that is 21st of February 2023, at the same time, that is 8 p.m. Nepal Standard Time. With this, I'm thanking you once again. I would like to conclude the session. Have a good time. See you in a month time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.